Investigators zeroing in on evidence in hopes of finding a suspect. Still, the only key material in this case is this doorbell camera video.
When FBI analysts pulled Nancy Guthrie's final phone records and isolated the very last communication she made as a free woman, one of them stopped typing.
32 days into the search for Nancy Guthrie, investigators are still poring over thousands of tips. But could the missing piece of evidence simply be the suspect's cell phone?
What that call revealed did not just shift the direction of the investigation. It pointed straight at someone nobody wanted to believe was involved. But before we get to that, you need to understand the timeline, because Nancy Guthrie did not simply vanish. She disappeared from inside a very specific sequence of events that begins with an ordinary Saturday evening and ends with 4 hours of complete silence that nobody has been able to explain. On Saturday, January 31st, 2026, Nancy called an Uber at 5:32 in the evening from her home in the Catalina Foothills neighborhood of Tucson. She was headed 4 miles away to her eldest daughter Annie's house for a family dinner and game night. Nothing felt off. Nothing looked wrong. By every account, it was the kind of evening families repeat 100 times without a second thought.
For the first time, the sheriff's department outlining a rough timeline for Nancy's disappearance. They say after dinner at her daughter's house Saturday night, Nancy was brought home by a family member at 9:48 p.m. At 9:50, her garage door closed. Then at 1:47 a.m., the doorbell camera disconnected.
After dinner, wrapped up around 9:30 to 9:45 that night, she got a ride home. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos later confirmed to the New York Times that she was dropped off and that her companion waited until she was safely inside before driving away.
Officials there told NBC News they believe Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker disconnected from a monitoring application around 2 a.m. on Sunday, which could help pinpoint the time she left her house. Guthrie is 84 years old, has mobility, and needs critical medication.
Surveillance data locks the timeline down to the minute. The garage door opened at 9:48 p.m. and closed at 9:50 p.m. Nancy was inside, and then nothing. 4 hours of silence between that garage door closing and the first sign that anything had gone wrong. At 1:47 in the morning on February 1st, Nancy's Google Nest doorbell camera was disconnected. At 2:12 a.m., the motion system picked up a figure near the home. At 2:28 a.m., and her pacemaker stopped transmitting to the monitoring app on her phone. Her phone was found inside the house the next day. So was her wallet, her car keys, and her daily heart medication. She never called anyone after she got home. She never texted. She never reached out for help. Whatever happened inside that house during those 4 hours, Nancy Guthrie faced it completely alone. And by 2:28 in the morning, even her heart had gone quiet. Now here is where it gets significant. The last communication on Nancy's phone, the final call that FBI analysts zeroed in on, did not come from a stranger. It led back to someone who had been in that house for dinner just hours before she disappeared. And what that phone record revealed about the timeline between that call and the moment the pacemaker went dark set the entire investigation on fire. The son-in-law everyone was talking about.
They now believe the son-in-law may be the prime suspect. Those are the words. Son-in-law may be the prime suspect at this point.
Within days of Nancy's disappearance, one name was all over social media. Theories, accusations, and outright fabrications spread faster than any fact checker could catch them. But here is the part that got buried in all of that noise. The actual picture of this man's life looked nothing like what the internet was building. Tommaso Cioni, Nancy's son-in-law, married her eldest daughter Annie in September 2006 and had lived in Tucson ever since. For over 15 years, he worked as an AP biology and 6th grade science teacher at Basis Oro Valley. Outside the classroom, he played electric bass in a local post-punk band, wrote poetry in Italian, studied lizards, and made homemade pasta from scratch. Annie celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary on Facebook by calling Tommaso the most beautiful. The intelligent, sensitive, talented, and also most hilarious person she had ever known. Family friend Zach Lynn, the drummer from Jimmy Eat World, publicly stated that Annie and Tommy are amazing people and dedicated parents who love and care for Nancy on a daily basis. On Christmas Day, 2025, just weeks before Nancy vanished, Nancy herself posted a family photo on Facebook showing everyone in matching pajamas. Tommaso was standing right beside her holding the family dog. She was beaming. And yet, it was Tommaso who drove Nancy home that night. He was the last confirmed person to see her. He knew the layout of that house. He knew where the cameras were. And the phone record FBI analysts had been staring at pointed directly at the gap between his departure and the moment everything went wrong. None of that stopped the accusations from spreading. Journalist Ashley Banfield reported on her podcast that a trusted law enforcement source had identified Cioni as the prime suspect. When challenged on Dan Abrams' SiriusXM show, she doubled down, claiming things had really tightened up inside the sheriff's department following her report. She added a line that stuck: "When they take shots at you, you are standing on the target." Those are the words. Son-in-law may be the prime suspect at this point. FBI agents were seen at Annie and Tommaso's home on February 7th for approximately 3 hours. Camera flashes were visible from inside. Deputies emerged wearing blue gloves, carrying evidence bags. Annie's car was impounded. Unverified claims about $50 million in gambling debts owed to a Mexican casino spread like wildfire before being completely debunked by multiple reputable outlets. The damage was already done. Then on February 16th, Sheriff Nano stood in front of cameras and issued a definitive statement. The Guthrie family, including all siblings and their spouses, had been cleared as possible suspects. He called the accusations not only wrong, but cruel. He confirmed the family had been ruled out within the first few days and had been fully cooperative throughout, cleared on paper. But the phone record that started the chain of suspicion still sat in evidence, and the crime scene it connected back to told a story of its own, one involving mistakes so serious that even the investigators themselves eventually had to answer for them. The investigation that nearly fell apart before it started. This is the part most coverage has not touched directly. Now, the Nancy Guthrie investigation did not just face an unknown suspect and a cold trail. In the very first week, it nearly destroyed itself. When Pima County Sheriff's Department arrived at Nancy's home on February 2nd, what they found was immediately alarming. Blood droplets on the front porch were later confirmed through DNA testing to belong to Nancy. Her phone and wallet sat untouched inside. There were signs of forced entry, small glass fragments near the front entrance, and the doorbell camera had been deliberately tampered with. Sheriff Nano stated bluntly that she did not walk away and that investigators believed she had been forced to leave that residence against her will. The FBI joined almost immediately. At its peak, the operation deployed around 400 investigators working around the clock. The case generated over 50,000 tips. But behind the scenes, critical errors were already compounding. The crime scene was released prematurely. Nanos admitted it himself. Investigators had to return days later to recover evidence they had missed on the first pass. A roof-mounted camera was completely overlooked during the initial walkthrough. The doorbell camera footage was initially declared unrecoverable because Nancy did not have a paid Nest subscription, only for the FBI to later pull images from residual back-end data that should have been pursued on day one. It got worse. The county's high-tech search aircraft pilot had been disciplined following a dispute with Nanos to patrol and reassigned to street patrol before this no replacement began. Two of the people most qualified to assist in exactly this kind of search were simply not there when they were needed most. And then there were the wrongful detentions. More than 20 people were detained and released over the course of the investigation. Carlos Palazuelos was stopped during a traffic check 60 miles south of Tucson and released the next day, telling reporters he hoped they found the real suspect because he was not it. Luke Anthony Daly was pulled from a residence 2 miles from Nancy's home during a full SWAT operation alongside his 77-year-old mother. Held for hours, then released. His attorney confirmed no link to the case whatsoever. Dominic Evans, an elementary school teacher who played drums in Tommaso's band, was targeted by online theorists who claimed his build matched the figure in the doorbell footage. Now, he told the New York Times he felt like someone had taken his name for clickbait and entertainment while innocent people got hurt. Meanwhile, the actual suspect they were hunting remained a grainy silhouette. The FBI released 4 black and white images: a male approximately 5'9" to 5'10", average build, ski mask, gloves, carrying a distinctive black Ozark Trail backpack sold exclusively at Walmart, and wearing a visible gun holster. His shoes appeared large, possibly a size 12 based on the tile dimensions in the footage. His clothes were producing their own investigative threads. That ski mask had unique stitching. Whoever he was, he had done his homework. He knew about the cameras. He came prepared for exactly this kind of night. But here is where it gets strange. The ransom note he left behind was not sent by mail and not delivered by phone. It came by email. And it contained details so specific that even experienced FBI veterans said they had rarely seen anything like it. The detail that shook them most connected directly back to Nancy's last phone call, the ransom demands and the deadline that changed everything. The notes did not come through traditional channels. They were sent by email to CBS Tucson affiliate KOLD-TV, a second Tucson station, and TMZ, spaced roughly 12 hours apart, each one escalating, each one revealing more than it should have known. TMZ founder Harvey Levin provided the most detailed public account of the first note's contents. visibly unsettled as he described it on air. The letter laid out precisely what the kidnappers wanted, what the consequences would be if demands were not met, and how everything was structured around escalating deadlines. The note demanded $6 million in Bitcoin, included a verified Bitcoin wallet address, and set two separate deadlines. The first was 5 p.m. on Thursday, February 5th. The second was 5 p.m. on Monday, February 9th, tied to a consequence described as more serious. But here is what made that note genuinely terrifying. It was not the dollar amount, it was what the author knew. The note contained details that had never been made public. The location of Nancy's Apple Watch, information about a floodlight at the property, a precise description of what Nancy had been wearing on the night she disappeared. The grammar was perfect, structured, layered. A retired FBI agent reviewing it flagged something else. Now, the author used the abbreviation USD for dollars, a term Americans almost never use in casual conversation. That either meant the writer was foreign-born or it was deliberate misdirection from someone sophisticated enough to think carefully about linguistic fingerprints. Around February 18th, TMZ received a second ransom email, more graphic and more chilling than the first. It demanded payment in a sophisticated cryptocurrency other than Bitcoin, used a different account, and cited media coverage of the case as a direct trigger for the escalated demands. Whoever wrote it had been watching the news, adjusting, responding in real time. Separately, a series of emails arrived from someone claiming not to be the kidnapper, but to have information about the kidnapper, offering it for one Bitcoin, roughly $70,000. TMZ confirmed the tone was clearly different, almost certainly not the same person who wrote the original notes. Then there was the fake ransom attempt. Derek Kella, a 42-year-old man from Hawthorne, California, was arrested after texting Annie Guthrie and Tommaso Cioni directly. "Did you get the Bitcoin? We are waiting on our end for the transaction." The FBI traced it back to his Gmail account. He was charged with transmitting a demand for ransom in interstate commerce and had absolutely nothing to do with the actual kidnapping. He had simply seen an opening and taken it. Both real deadlines passed. No confirmed payment, no further contact from the actual kidnappers. CNN analyst John Miller sat with that silence and offered the most haunting explanation yet. No, this may have begun as a planned home invasion that went completely sideways and was then re-engineered into a kidnap for ransom scenario because the suspect's options had suddenly narrowed to nothing. The ransom notes were digital, no handwriting to analyze, no paper to trace. But there was a glove. One black glove found in an open field 2 miles from Nancy's home, and what the FBI found inside it was about to fracture the forensic investigation in a way nobody expected, the DNA that matched nobody. If this case gets solved, it will almost certainly come down to what is sitting in a laboratory right now. And here is the part that has not gotten the attention it deserves. The forensic evidence in this case has been simultaneously the most promising lead and the single most frustrating obstacle in the entire investigation. Adele blood on the front porch was confirmed through DNA testing to belong to Nancy Guthrie. Violence happened at that home. That much is beyond question. During searches of the surrounding area, investigators recovered approximately 16 gloves in total. Most belonged to volunteers who had discarded them during search efforts. But one black glove found roughly 2 miles from Nancy's home in a field near a roadside appeared to match what the masked suspect had been wearing in the doorbell footage. The FBI extracted a DNA profile from that glove. Unknown male. No match in CODIS, the FBI's national DNA database containing roughly 22 million samples. The suspect had never been arrested for a qualifying felony. But here is where it gets complicated. The DNA from the glove did not match the unknown DNA recovered from inside Nancy's property. I have 2 different samples, 2 different profiles. That raises a deeply unsettling possibility. More than one person may have been involved in whatever happened inside that house. Inside the home, the picture got even more complicated. Most DNA recovered traced back to people with legitimate reasons to have been there. Family members, landscapers, service workers. But several samples contained mixed genetic material from multiple individuals, creating processing difficulties that standard lab techniques could not untangle. The samples were sent to a private lab in Florida rather than the FBI's facility at Quantico. Former Chief Deputy Richard Castigar did not hold back. All the evidence should have gone to Quantico from the beginning. The decision to route it elsewhere was a mistake. Forensic science professor April Stonehouse at Arizona State University looked at those numbers and described what she saw with the kind of quiet precision that keeps investigators awake at night. The sample likely contained approximately 90% of Nancy's own genetic material and only about 10% from a potential suspect. Separating a signal that faint from that much noise is not just difficult. It is the kind of ratio that defines whether a case gets solved or goes cold. C.C. Moore, chief genetic genealogist at Parabon Nanolabs, offered a thread of hope. Even if standard DNA profiling fails on that 10%, the same sample might still yield a profile suitable for investigative genetic genealogy. The same technique that cracked the Golden State Killer case after decades of dead ends. So, forensic scientist Peter Valentine of the University of New Haven pushed the analysis further. If multiple people entered that home to take Nancy, he said, there must be physical evidence of their presence beyond DNA. Hair, fibers, trace materials that do not degrade the same way biological samples do. The labs need to look beyond the obvious. And while those samples sit in a Florida facility being analyzed and reanalyzed, the clock keeps moving. A daughter's words that stopped the country cold. Savannah Guthrie had spent her entire career on the other side of stories like this one. Every morning, millions of Americans turned on their televisions and watched her deliver news about other people's worst days. But on February 4th, 2026, she was no longer the anchor. She was a daughter who did not know whether her mother was alive or dead. She stepped away from every professional obligation, including a planned role co-hosting the 2026 Winter Olympics opening ceremonies, to focus entirely on finding Nancy. On February 4th, she appeared alongside her siblings Annie and Cameron in their first public video, speaking directly to whoever had taken their mother. We need to know without a doubt that she is alive and that you have her. We want to hear from you. We are ready to listen. Please reach out to us. Her voice barely holding. 3 days later, on February 7th, the three siblings stood holding hands in a second video that appeared to respond directly to the ransom demands. We received your message and we understand, they said. We beg you now to return our mother to us. This is very valuable to us and we will pay. Then came February 24th. And Savannah's statement that day was different from anything that had come before it. She announced a $1 million family reward and then said publicly for the first time what everyone had been quietly fearing. Every hour and every minute and every second and every long night has been agony. We still believe in a miracle. We still believe she can come home. We also know she may be lost. She may already be gone. She may have gone home to the Lord she loves, dancing in heaven with her mom and dad. At the same time, the family donated $500,000 to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Annie Guthrie, throughout all of it, took a different path. She appeared in the family videos, but never served as the primary spokesperson. She gave no individual interviews. She made no statements addressing the suspicion aimed at her husband. Her silence was read a dozen different ways. Legal strategy, family loyalty, or simply the impossibility of defending your spouse in public while privately not knowing if your mother is still breathing. On March 2nd, day 30, Savannah, Annie, and Tommaso walked arm in arm to the growing tribute of yellow flowers outside Nancy's home. Audible sobbing was captured on camera. They left a handwritten note. Mama, we miss you so much. Our hearts are broken. We are standing on ash on scorched earth. But Mom, though we are surrounded by so much darkness and uncertainty, our love burns bright. We love you, Mommy, our best friend. President Donald Trump personally called Savannah on February 4th following an NBC interview and pledged federal resources to assist the search. The family had done everything in their power. They had begged publicly. They had offered a fortune. They had let their grief become a national event. And still, as the case moved into its second month, the most important question sat exactly where it started. That final phone call. The one FBI analysts zeroed in on. The one that led back to a specific name, a specific timeline, a specific 4-hour gap that nobody has been able to account for. The details of what that call contained, who made it, what was said, and what happened in the hours that followed are still at the center of everything investigators are working toward right now. Nancy's phone is in evidence. Her pacemaker data is in evidence. The phone record is in evidence. The glove DNA is in a Florida lab. The masked figure in the Walmart backpack is still unidentified, and Nancy Guthrie has not come home.